The United States is now an occupied country, but it will soon be an occupied country no longer. November 5th, 2024 will be Liberation Day in America.
And we will win because when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for.
Some clips there last night of former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris making their final pitch to voters. But today it is finally Election Day in America, and history could be made as you, the voters, head to the polls to make your choice in a very close 2024 presidential election. Now, the first results are already in from the tiny town of Dixville Notch, New Hampshire. That continued its midnight voting tradition. The 6 voters there came out split between Trump and Harris in what's proving to be a razor-thin election. And if it's any indication of what's to come nationally, it could be several days before we know who the next president will be. We're going to give you now a live look at a polling station. This is in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Many polling places on the East Coast have just opened seconds ago. Polls close in most states at 8 p.m. local time, which means over in Alaska, the last polls close as late as 1 a.m. Eastern. Now, Donald Trump is expected to vote today in his home state of Florida, while Kamala Harris shared over the weekend that she sent back her mail-in ballot to California. Now, millions across the country are already casting their ballots, and in some areas, there have been incredibly long lines outside polling places. You're looking at fresh data showing that more than 82 million people voted early across the country. And we, of course, have team coverage of this election for you this morning with CBS News campaign reporters Libby, Cathey and Aaron Navarro at the top of your screens, and CBS News political director Gómez here with me in Studio 57. Aaron, let's start with you. You're in Philadelphia following the Harris campaign, and the vice president held a rally last night, even knocked on doors herself in a last-ditch effort to convince voters. Tell us about her final pitch.
Errol, good to be with you. Happy Election Day. Her final pitch has 2 big themes to me. The first being that she will be, quote, the president for all Americans, this sense of unity that she can bring the country together. But it's also strategically an attempt to kind of carve off some of those Republican voters who maybe voted for Nikki Haley or other Republicans during the primary and not former President Trump. The second part is moving forward, saying that she represents a new generation of leadership, has an optimistic look and vision for the country. And in recent speeches, you don't see her name or hear her name, former President Trump, directly. She often talks about, quote, turning the page when it comes to American politics. And that's a reference to Trump, but you don't hear his name in the closing remarks.
Often, pollsters will tell you, look at the trend lines, look at the change over the last few days before an election. What has been the mood of the campaign as we get to the finish line here?
Yeah, on the ground, at her events, the campaign is seeing a lot of crowds, believes that they have momentum. Harris is saying as much on the actual stage. Talking to the campaign and sources familiar, they know, and Harris knows, that this will be a close race, is expecting it to be so, but remains, quote, calm and optimistic about how today is going to turn out. But they know, and Democratic officials I've been talking to know, that a big election day turnout is crucial. In the early vote, you saw Republicans try and make an effort to maybe be even with the Democratic Party. They know that for their party to hold the White House, they will need a big turnout today on Election Day.
All right, Aaron Navarro for us in Philadelphia. Thank you so much. We turn now to Libby Cathey, who was following the Trump campaign in Raleigh, North Carolina. Libby, what was Trump's final pitch to voters last night as he crosses the finish line here?
Good to be with you, Errol, and happy Election Day. It is here after a year and a half and then some covering these candidates, and now it being former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris here. Now, former President Donald Trump here in Raleigh, I was at his first rally of this closing day through the battlegrounds, and his really closing message dealt with immigration, as expected. It's been central to his campaign throughout, and he really ties the economy, health care, education, all these other issues, back to immigration, promising those mass deportations and invoking a law from 1798 to do that. But he also offered somewhat of an undisciplined message as well. We've heard the former president say several times, don't you want a president who can go off teleprompter? Well, because of that, going off teleprompter in Grand Rapids last night, he nearly called former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi a word that starts with a B, he said. So also offering that undisciplined message here in the final days and hours. We will see today if that resonates with those Republican voters who may have been on the fence with him and undecided voters. The Trump campaign sure would like to think so. They think Trump being himself is effective, but really that's going to be the test today, Errol. It is finally here.
And Trump is still attracting major endorsements, like from podcaster Joe Rogan. He has one of the most, if not the most popular podcast in the country, and he just put his support behind Trump overnight. Why is he significant?
Yeah, this is significant. Although it's an 11th hour endorsement, Joe Rogan has so much reach. We've talked about this on your show. Some 14.5 million listeners on any given week to his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. And that audience is a lot of these young male voters, although there's more than just that, but there is this sect of young male voters that the Trump campaign continues to try to reach. Those low propensity voters, as they're called, may have not voted in a presidential election before. They want to drive them out. So the Trump campaign thinking, Joe Rogan's endorsement today may drive a couple more of these young men to the polls. It is an 11th hour endorsement, though, so we'll see. And historically, it's not known if endorsements really drive people to the polls, but at this point, the Trump campaign touting that in the 11th hour. They are happy to take that. As you know, Joe Rogan, for a time, it was to be seen if maybe he would sit down with Vice President Kamala Harris for a podcast interview. That ultimately did not shake out in him offering the former president his endorsement last night.
All right, Libby, Cathey, with those latest headlines, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. And for more analysis of the election, we have here CBS News political director Finn Gómez in Studio 57. A real pleasure to have you in person, Finn, and
hey,
to
Errol.
see you.
Yeah, happy E-Day.
Happy E-Day.
That's right.
As all the results come in tonight, because we know there's a lot of concern as well about the sanctity of the vote, the protection, the safety, what should viewers expect? Because we don't expect for this to be clear early.
That's absolutely right, Errol. And I think two words here I think that people should remember is caution and patience. Right?
Caution and patience.
We are going to see some, the results come in. The polls close in Pennsylvania at 8 o'clock. They close in Georgia at 7, North Carolina at 7:30. So, but we should start seeing some those returns and some understanding of where we are in this razor-thin race, right? It is such a close race. Those are key battleground states, as you know, and could determine the outcome of this election.
And because we don't know what people are doing as they head to the ballot box, there could be surprises today.
Absolutely.
We even had a surprise poll from Iowa, reliably
Shot
read,
poll.
showing Harris ahead of Trump. There seems to be some momentum in North Carolina as well. But when is the soonest that we might know an outcome if there is a major surprise on either side?
Well, I think that, by tonight, after the polls close, I think you have a much more of a more concrete of an indicator of where we are. But I do think this is a race because of how tight it is. It could be days, it could be longer, hopefully not. But that is something that I think folks need to know.
And you and I were speaking about how Latino voters have been a focus in Pennsylvania,
Absolutely.
Women voters because of abortion rights. This could sway all sorts of different races as far as in the Senate and House. What are you looking out for?
I think especially with as you just discussed earlier, I think women voters is something that the Harris campaign has said overall is something they expect to turn out. That electorate is expected to turn out for them, hopefully big today, they say, but also that could also, and Latinos as well, in some of these key crucial races, and that could determine how the winners in those races. I think one of the key Senate races that I'm watching is the one in Arizona. That is the one that lines up. That's also a presidential battleground state, but between between Ruben Gallego and also and Carrie Lake. We all know Carrie Lake from the gubernatorial race in 2022. Even though Gallego has taken, in most polls, taken the lead in that race, I think it shows that he has his approach to Latino voters, his approach on immigration, and also his appeal to Latino men, something that the Harris campaign has struggled with at times throughout this cycle, is something that I think Democrats are bullish on and could be a blueprint for potentially future election cycles.
So much interesting data and great stories to dive into tonight. I hope you've got your rest, you've got your coffee, you've got your running shoes.
I got my coffee, man. I got a bucket of coffee just ready to go.
You'll need it. Finn Gómez, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And everyone, this is your open invite to stay with us all day for coverage. You can watch Election Night with the CBS News team live from our election headquarters in New York and with our teams spread out across the country in those battleground states. Join us for real-time results, analysis, and exclusive polling. Coverage begins at 4 p.m. Eastern here on CBS News 24/7 and at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS.